Have you ever wondered if there's a hidden language of wealth that's been right under your nose all along? What if I told you that 7 simple words, spoken with conviction, could transform your financial reality? This isn't about chance, luck, or even hard work. It's about tapping into a spiritual law so powerful that it turned one woman's empty pockets into a $100 million fortune. I'm talking about Florence Scovel Shinn's remarkable discovery of what she calls the living voice of God within. You. Not magic spells or get-rich-quick schemes, but a profound spiritual principle that works with mathematical precision when applied correctly. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? You've prayed for financial abundance, worked harder than everyone around you, played the numbers, checked your horoscope, and still, nothing changes. The bills pile up, the debts increase, and that constant pressure of how will I make it to next month never seems to lift. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn might completely transform how you think about wealth creation. While the world keeps telling you that financial success is random, a lucky break, a fortunate birth, being at the right place at the right time, Shinn discovered something altogether different. She uncovered what she calls the law of assumption, a principle more reliable than any bank account, more powerful than any investment strategy, and more accessible than any financial advisor. This law operates beyond the visible world of circumstances, beyond the limitations of your current bank balance, beyond what conventional wisdom has taught you about money. What makes this teaching different is that it doesn't require you to chase external solutions. The power isn't in some secret investment or hidden opportunity. It's in the voice you speak within yourself each night. When that voice repeats with absolute faith, Shinn observed something remarkable. The outer world begins to bend to match it. I know this might sound too simple to be true. What you're about to discover might surprise you, especially if you've been conditioned to believe that wealth creation must be complicated, difficult, or reserved for the privileged few. But according to Shinn, this simplicity is precisely what makes it so powerful and universally accessible. The law of assumption operates independently of your background, education, or current circumstances. It doesn't care about your past failures or successes. It responds only to the inner state you cultivate and maintain through conscious, deliberate assumption. Think about it. What if everything you've been taught about wealth creation has been missing this fundamental spiritual component? What if the real secret to financial abundance isn't out there in the world of action, but in here, in the world of assumption? As we continue this journey together, I'll reveal exactly how Florence Scovel Shinn articulated this principle, and more importantly, how you can begin applying it in your own life tonight. If you're ready to implement these powerful manifestation techniques in your own life, subscribe now for weekly wisdom that transforms theory into results. I'll be sharing exclusive methods that aren't taught anywhere else. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because what Florence Scovel Shinn discovered isn't just another self-help technique. It's a fundamental revelation about the architecture of reality itself. She identified 3 pillars that form the foundation of this wealth transformation. How imagination literally creates your reality, the profound power of repetition when charged with emotion, and the specific 7-word I formula that manifested her fortune. This isn't merely positive thinking. It's a methodical, almost scientific approach to tapping into what Shinn calls the creative substance of the universe. The journey of transformation begins when you understand that imagination isn't fantasy. It's the very blueprint from which your external circumstances are constructed. But here's where Shinn's teaching takes an unexpected turn into ancient wisdom. She reveals something that might shake the foundations of how you understand spirituality and yourself. The name of God, as revealed to Moses at the burning bush, wasn't some distant, unreachable title. It was, I am. Think about the revelation hidden in plain sight. Every time you say, I am, You're invoking the creative power of the universe. This isn't mere coincidence or linguistic curiosity. It's the hidden mechanism behind all manifestation. When Moses asked who he should say sent him, the voice responded, "I am that I am." Tell them, "I am has sent you." The Creator didn't offer a title separated from humanity, but gave the very phrase we all use countless times throughout our day. The implications of this revelation are staggering. Your daily self-talk isn't just idle chatter, it's prophecy in motion. Every I am statement becomes a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious mind. This is why most people unknowingly sabotage their financial destiny with statements like, "I am broke," "I am unlucky," or "I am struggling." They're literally programming their reality with divine power, but in the wrong direction. This understanding creates a paradigm shift in how we approach wealth creation. The mindset transformation begins when you recognize that every time you declare "I am," followed by lack, you're misusing the most sacred creative force in the universe. You're tying the divine name to a lie about yourself. The impact of this realization can completely revolutionize your relationship with money. What's fascinating is that this journey toward abundance doesn't begin with external actions, but with an internal revolution, changing what follows "I am" in your daily speech. The decision to align your self-talk with prosperity rather than lack becomes the hidden catalyst for everything that follows. If this teaching resonates with your spirit on a deep level, write "I am abundance" in the comments below. Let's think about this revelation for a moment. Our casual, everyday "I am" statements are actually prophecies in motion. Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that these seemingly innocent self-descriptions create ripple effects that shape our reality in profound ways. When we declare "I am broke" or "I am unlucky," we're not merely describing our current situation. We're actively programming our subconscious to maintain and reinforce these conditions. This insight reveals the hidden mechanism behind why some people remain trapped in cycles of lack despite their best efforts. The subconscious mind doesn't analyze whether your "I am" statements are helpful or harmful. It simply accepts them as commands to be fulfilled. It's like planting seeds in a garden. Whatever you plant will eventually grow, whether you plant weeds or flowers. The transformation begins when you recognize the creative power of these declarations. Your words aren't just describing your reality, they're creating it. This realization represents a profound paradigm shift in how we approach life's challenges, especially financial ones. The journey toward abundance requires vigilance over this internal dialogue that most people overlook entirely. Shinn shares a remarkable story that illustrates this principle in action. A student came to her utterly defeated, saying, "Everything I touch fails. I am cursed." With wisdom and compassion, Shinn immediately identified the root of his problem. He was misusing the creative power of "I am" by attaching it to a negative prophecy. She guided him to replace "I am cursed" with "I am blessed," "I am chosen," "I am prosperous." At first, these new declarations felt strange to him, even false. But this discomfort was simply the resistance of his old thought patterns being challenged. Through consistent practice, something remarkable happened. Within weeks, opportunities began appearing in his life, debts were unexpectedly cleared, and his circumstances transformed in ways he couldn't logically explain. What changed? Not his external actions, but the internal decree. He changed what followed, "I am," and the universe rearranged itself to match this new declaration. The revelation here is that the world doesn't shape our identity. Our identity shapes the world. This represents a complete inversion of how most people understand cause and effect. When you grasp this principle, you begin to see that your habitual self-talk isn't just commentary, it's creation in progress. Every casual "I am" statement becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of your life. The question then becomes, what masterpiece are you painting with your words? If you've caught yourself using disempowering "I am" statements in the past, type "changing my words" below. The journey of transformation goes beyond merely changing the words. It requires a complete revolution in how you relate to your own declarations. This is where many seekers on the path to abundance hit a hidden roadblock. Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that our identity statements are like the brushstrokes that paint the canvas of our reality. Every time you say, "I am," you're not just describing yourself, you're invoking creative power that shapes your experience. The profound insight here is that your circumstances don't define your identity statements. Your identity statements define your circumstances. This reversal of conventional wisdom represents a quantum leap in consciousness. Most people wait for their bank account to improve before they'll say, "I am wealthy," not realizing this backward approach keeps them locked in scarcity. Don't miss my next video on the hidden manifestation formula. Subscribe now to join thousands of others who are applying these principles and creating abundance in their lives. The awakening happens when you dare to make declarations that contradict your current reality. This isn't about denial or delusion. It's about understanding the causal relationship between identity and experience. Your current conditions are merely the harvest of yesterday's "I am" statements. To change tomorrow's harvest, you must plant different seeds today. But here's where Shinn's teaching becomes even more nuanced and powerful. Words alone, no matter how carefully chosen, lack the power to transform reality unless they're accompanied by corresponding feelings. This revelation explains why so many affirmations fail to produce results. You can repeat, "I am wealthy" 1,000 times daily, but if poverty still grips your heart, if you still feel poor, despite your words, the subconscious will only register "I am poor" and faithfully reproduce that state. This insight reveals the critical difference between empty affirmations and what Shinn calls living decrees. An affirmation without feeling is like an envelope without a letter inside. It's just an empty container. But when you infuse your words with genuine emotion, they become vehicles of creation that penetrate the subconscious and reshape your reality. The distinction is similar to the difference between reading about swimming and actually getting in the water. One is intellectual, the other experiential. Your subconscious doesn't respond to intellectual concepts, it responds to felt experience. This is why countless people can repeat positive statements for years without seeing change. They're engaging only the conscious mind, while the subconscious, the true creative center, remains untouched. The inner breakthrough occurs when you not only speak the words, but feel the reality they represent. This emotional dimension is what transforms ordinary language into creative power. When you say, "I am wealthy," can you feel the security, the freedom, the peace that wealth brings? Can you taste it, touch it, live in it emotionally before it manifests physically? If you've noticed the difference between empty words and emotionally charged declarations in your own life, comment, "Feeling is the key," below. This deeper understanding of the subconscious mind reveals why so many spiritual traditions emphasize the heart rather than the intellect. Florence Scovel Shinn draws our attention to the biblical wisdom, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he," not as he thinks intellectually, but as he feels emotionally. This revelation illuminates why two people can repeat identical affirmations with dramatically different results. The subconscious doesn't register the words themselves, it registers the feeling tone behind them. The heart, in biblical language, doesn't refer to the physical organ in your chest, but to the subconscious mind, the creative center of your being. This is the soil in which all seeds of manifestation must be planted. And like actual soil, its quality determines whether seeds will flourish or wither. When you declare, "I am wealthy," while feeling poor, it's like dropping precious seeds onto barren ground. The words never penetrate deep enough to take root. Shinn brilliantly illustrates this principle with a farming metaphor that makes the abstract concept tangible. Think of a farmer scattering seed. If he casts it on rocky ground, no harvest comes. If he drops it on shallow soil, it may sprout quickly, but withers under the sun's heat. But when it falls on rich, moist, receptive earth, it sinks deep and brings forth 100-fold harvest. Your emotional state is the soil of your subconscious. If your inner landscape is dominated by doubt, worry, or skepticism, your affirmations remain on the surface of consciousness, easily scorched by the first contradiction. But when your declarations are spoken with genuine feeling, with emotional conviction, they penetrate the subconscious and take root there. Once planted in this fertile ground, they cannot be denied expression. The transformation process begins when you understand that effective manifestation isn't about the perfection of your words, but the authenticity of your feeling. This insight resolves the mystery of why identical affirmations produce different results. For different people, some are planting in fertile soil, others on stone. This revelation about the subconscious challenges our cultural bias toward intellectual understanding. In the realm of manifestation, emotional intelligence trumps intellectual knowledge every time. You can intellectually understand the principle of abundance perfectly while emotionally vibrating at the frequency of lack, and your emotions will win every time. The journey toward mastery involves developing emotional flexibility, the ability to generate authentic feeling states regardless of external circumstances. This isn't pretending or self-deception. It's recognizing that your emotional state is not merely a reaction to circumstances, but a creative force that shapes them. When you speak affirmations, are you merely reciting words, or are you entering the feeling state they represent? The difference determines whether you're just talking about manifestation or actually engaging in it. If you've experienced the difference between intellectual understanding and emotional knowing in your own life, type heart over mind in the comments. Let's explore one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most illuminating examples, a story that perfectly demonstrates the transformative power of emotionally charged affirmations. She once counseled a woman who had diligently repeated prosperity affirmations for months without results. This student would faithfully declare, "I am wealthy," and "I am prosperous." Yet, she admitted to Shinn that she felt like a fraud every time these words left her lips. With remarkable insight, Shinn identified the core issue. You're trying to plant seed on stone. You're scattering words without feeling. The revelation was that this woman's intellectual affirmations never penetrated the subconscious because they lacked emotional resonance. Her conscious mind said one thing while her emotional body communicated something entirely different. And the subconscious always prioritizes feeling over words. The breakthrough came when Shinn guided her to stop the mechanical repetition and instead enter the silence of imagination. "Close your eyes," she instructed, "and feel what it would be like to be wealthy." Rather than focusing on the words themselves, she encouraged her student to experience the emotional landscape of abundance, the joy of paying bills with ease, the freedom of buying without counting pennies, the peace of financial security. This shift from intellectual affirmation to emotional embodiment created an entirely different inner experience. When the woman began using the words "I am wealthy" as doorways to the feeling state of wealth, her whole atmosphere changed. Within months, her financial situation transformed dramatically. The words hadn't changed, but the emotional container that held them had undergone a complete metamorphosis. This case study illuminates what Shinn means when she says, "Feeling is the secret." The journey from scarcity to abundance isn't about finding the perfect words. It's about accessing the perfect feeling state. Words are merely vehicles that transport you to emotional destinations. Without the journey into feeling, they remain empty vessels. The practical application of this wisdom requires a fundamental shift in how we approach affirmations. When you say, "I am wealthy," don't say it as a wish or a future possibility. Say it as a present fact. More importantly, feel it as a present fact. Taste the joy of abundance. Hear the voices of friends congratulating you. See the numbers in your account. When you wrap your declarations in authentic emotion, the subconscious receives them not as empty promises, but as established law. This emotional dimension transforms your words from empty affirmations into what Shinn calls creative decrees, prophecies that cannot fail because they've been sealed with feeling in the subconscious mind. If you've been practicing affirmations without emotional engagement, type "upgrading my practice" in the comments. Now, I want to go deeper into why Florence Scovel Shinn specifically emphasizes 7 words as the optimal formula for manifestation. This isn't arbitrary. It connects to profound symbolic patterns found throughout spiritual traditions. 7 represents divine completion, a number that appears repeatedly in Scripture. The heavens were finished in 7 days. The walls of Jericho fell after 7 circuits. Naaman was cleansed after dipping 7 times in the Jordan River. Shinn recognized that 7 represents fullness, wholeness, and the seal of God's finished work. When she teaches that 7 words are sufficient to transform your financial reality, she's drawing on this ancient wisdom about divine order and completion. The number itself carries a resonance that aligns with universal principles of creation and manifestation. This revelation about 7 words challenges our tendency to overcomplicate the manifestation process. Many seekers believe they need elaborate rituals, lengthy affirmations, or complex visualization sequences. But Shinn discovered that transformation often comes through simplicity rather than complexity. 7 words, properly chosen and emotionally charged, can carry the full weight of your desire and collapse the world of lack into abundance. Yet here's the critical insight that prevents this teaching from becoming mere superstition. The power doesn't reside in the words themselves, as if they were magical incantations or spells. The words are simply vessels designed to carry feeling, and it's the feeling that impresses the subconscious and creates reality. You could speak any phrase, long or short, but if it doesn't induce the state of fulfillment, if it doesn't clothe you in the mood of the wish already realized, it remains empty repetition. Shinn illuminates this principle by referencing Jesus on the cross, declaring, "It is finished." Though only 3 words, this declaration carried the entire completion of his mission. The feeling of accomplishment, of divine completion, was fully present in those 3 words. Similarly, your 7 words must imply completion, thanksgiving, and current possession, not future possibility. The revelation here transforms how we approach manifestation entirely. Instead of begging for future fulfillment, we enter the emotional state of present possession. Instead of straining toward a distant goal, we rest in the feeling of completion. This paradigm shift represents the difference between prayer as petition and prayer as thanksgiving for what is already done. The secret lies in choosing 7 words that naturally evoke the feeling of fulfillment, words that resonate with your particular desire, yet carry the unmistakable energy of completion. These words become the gateway through which you enter the state of the wish fulfilled, not intellectually, but emotionally. If this understanding of the 7-word formula has sparked a revelation for you, type "divine completion" in the comments. Let me bring to life one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most powerful examples, the specific 7-word formula that transformed a student's financial reality. This woman had struggled for years with financial instability, repeating lengthy, complex affirmations that left her mentally exhausted and emotionally drained. Despite her dedication to these elaborate declarations, her circumstances remained unchanged. When she came to Shinn for guidance, the spiritual teacher offered an unexpected insight. Reduce it. Choose 7 words only, and let them be the final decree, the seal of the wish fulfilled. After careful consideration, the student selected this 7-word phrase: "Thank you, Father. It is already done." Notice the brilliant simplicity and structure of this formula. It begins with gratitude, thank you, acknowledges the divine source, Father, and declares absolute completion, it is already done. These elements create a perfect vessel for the feeling of fulfillment, combining thankfulness with the emotional certainty that what was desired has already been accomplished. Each night as she prepared for sleep, the woman would whisper these 7 words. The transformation didn't happen instantly. At first, they were just words, intellectual concepts without emotional resonance. But as she continued the practice, something profound began to shift. The words became clothed in feeling. She began to experience genuine relief, authentic gratitude, and the liberating sensation of knowing her financial worries were already resolved. Within months, unexpected money began to flow into her life. Debts that had seemed insurmountable mysteriously dissolved. Opportunities appeared that she couldn't have orchestrated through logical planning. She found herself living in the financial ease she had long desired, all from consistently applying this 7-word formula with genuine feeling. This brings us to another crucial revelation in Shinn's teaching: the optimal timing for this practice. She discovered that these words are most effective when spoken at night, just before sleep. This isn't arbitrary. It's based on a profound understanding of consciousness. The border of sleep represents a unique threshold where the conscious mind's resistance naturally diminishes and the subconscious becomes extraordinarily receptive. During our waking hours, the analytical mind constantly evaluates, judges, and often rejects new ideas that contradict its established beliefs. It creates a barrier between our conscious declarations and the subconscious mind that must receive them to create change. But at night, as the body grows still and the senses fade, this conscious resistance weakens. The gateway between the conscious and subconscious stands open, making this the perfect moment for planting new seeds of belief. Whatever feeling state dominates your consciousness in those drowsy moments before sleep gets sealed upon the subconscious and must eventually express in your external reality. This twilight state becomes a sacred time for transformation, the optimal hour for planting the seeds of new identity. If you've discovered your own powerful 7-word formula that resonates with you, share it by typing "My formula is" in the comments. Let me guide you through what might be the most profound revelation in Florence Scovel Shinn's entire teaching: the concept of living in the end. This principle transcends mere positive thinking or visualization. It represents a complete paradigm shift in how we approach manifestation and reveals the true essence of the law of assumption. Living in the end means mentally and emotionally inhabiting the state of wish fulfillment before there's any tangible evidence of it. Instead of seeing your desire as a distant goal to be achieved through struggle and effort, you assume the consciousness of already possessing it. This mental stance is radically different from conventional approaches to achievement that focus on the journey toward a destination. The revelation here is that without this psychological stance of completion, all other manifestation practices become hollow. Your words lack power, your prayers go unanswered, and your affirmations produce no fruit. Why? Because whenever you say, "One day I will be wealthy," you're actually confessing, "I am not wealthy now." And the subconscious, hearing only your present state, faithfully reproduces that lack. The transformation begins when you dare to say, "I am wealthy now," even when every external circumstance contradicts this declaration. This isn't self-deception. It's recognizing that the inner state always precedes the outer manifestation. You're planting the seed of a new identity that must eventually express itself in your external experience. Shinn's metaphysical framework takes this understanding even deeper. She proposes that we're not actually creating wealth out of nothing. We're selecting it from the infinite states of being that already exist. This perspective aligns with quantum theories, suggesting that all possibilities exist simultaneously in potential form until consciousness collapses them into specific experiences. Think of it this way: the beggar and the millionaire, the sick and the healthy, the sorrowful and the joyful. All these are states of consciousness ready to be worn like garments. You don't have to manufacture these states. You simply need to step into them through deliberate assumption. You change your life by changing the inner garment you wear, not by manipulating external circumstances. This understanding revolutionizes our approach to manifestation. Rather than seeing ourselves as separate from our desires, striving to reach them through effort and time, we recognize that we can mentally occupy any state through the power of assumption. The journey toward abundance becomes an inner shift of identity, rather than an outer accumulation of resources. When you truly grasp this principle, manifestation ceases to be about getting what you want and becomes about embodying who you already are in the inner reality, which then must express itself in the outer world through the perfect law of correspondence. If this concept of living in the end has illuminated your understanding of manifestation, type "embodying the end" in the comments. Let me take you deeper into Florence Scovel Shinn's remarkable personal testimony, a story that perfectly illustrates the transformative power of living in the end. When she longed to return to her home in Barbados, her external circumstances presented overwhelming obstacles. She had no visible means, no money for passage, no prospects of help. By conventional logic, her desire seemed impossible. Notice what she didn't do in this situation. She didn't say, "One day, I will go back to Barbados," or "I hope somehow to return home." Had she taken this approach, focusing on future possibility rather than present reality, she would have remained in New York, perpetually dreaming of someday. Instead, she made a pivotal decision that altered both her consciousness and her circumstances. She chose to live in the end. Each night, as she prepared for sleep, that sacred threshold where the subconscious is most receptive, she would immerse herself in the sensory experience of already being in Barbados. She didn't merely visualize her homeland. She inhabited it completely in her imagination. She felt the tropical air caressing her skin, heard the distinctive voices of her family calling her name, experienced the familiar sensation of walking the streets of Bridgetown. The brilliance of her approach was in the complete psychological shift it created. She didn't say, "I will go." She declared, "I am there." This subtle but profound distinction represents the essence of the law of assumption. Within weeks of this nightly practice, her external reality rearranged itself to match her inner assumption when her brother unexpectedly sent her a ticket and money for the journey home. This personal testimony illuminates something profound about the nature of reality itself. The world doesn't just randomly respond to our desires. It precisely mirrors our inner state of being. When Shinn assumed the state of already being in Barbados, the universe organized the necessary bridge of incidents to manifest that reality. This approach finds powerful validation in Scripture, particularly in Paul's instruction to call those things which be not as though they were. This biblical principle perfectly captures the essence of assumption. When you declare, "I am wealthy," while your bank account suggests otherwise, you're not engaging in self-deception. You're calling forth an unseen reality that already exists in potential form. The spiritual revelation here is that assumption isn't merely a psychological technique. It's aligning yourself with divine creative principles. Because the unseen governs the seen, your assumption must eventually clothe itself in physical fact. The temporary contradiction between your inner state and outer circumstances is simply the time lag between spiritual cause and material effect. If you've experienced the power of assuming a desire as already fulfilled, type "calling forth reality" in the comments. Now, I want to delve into one of the most subtle yet transformative distinctions in Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching: the difference between thinking of wealth and thinking from wealth. This nuance might seem semantic at first glance, but it represents a profound shift in consciousness that determines whether manifestation remains an endless waiting game or becomes a lived experience. When you think of wealth, you're contemplating abundance as something separate from yourself, a distant shore you hope to reach someday. This perspective actually reinforces the very separation you're trying to overcome. You're positioning yourself as the seeker and wealth as the sought, maintaining the psychological gap between you and your desire. The breakthrough occurs when you shift to thinking from wealth, assuming the inner stance of someone who already possesses abundance. From this psychological vantage point, you're not reaching for wealth, you're expressing it. You're not hoping for freedom, you're living from freedom. You're not praying for supply as something absent. You're operating from the consciousness of supply as your present reality. This pivot in perspective alters everything. When you lie down to sleep at night, don't visualize wealth as a future acquisition. Experience it as a present possession. Feel the security, the peace, the gratitude that accompanies financial freedom. This subtle shift is what Shinn describes as the difference between endless waiting and sudden fulfillment. However, Shinn doesn't paint an unrealistic picture of this journey. With remarkable candor, she acknowledges that the moment you begin living from this new assumption, your external reality will often rise up to challenge it. This is what she calls the test of the senses, the inevitable phase when 3D circumstances seem to mock your inner knowing. When you declare, "I am wealthy," the outer world might respond with increased bills, unexpected expenses, or friends reminding you of your debts. Your bank account might temporarily look emptier than ever. In this critical moment, many seekers abandon their practice, concluding it doesn't work. But Shinn reveals a profound truth. This contradiction isn't evidence of failure. It's actually confirmation that the law is working. She explains that the old state is dying, and like all dying things, it makes its final protest before vanishing. This resistance from external reality represents a crossroads in your manifestation journey. If you surrender to appearances, you resurrect the old state. If you hold fast to your assumption despite contradictory evidence, you crucify the old and give birth to the new. The revelation here transforms how we interpret challenging circumstances. What appears as an obstacle may actually be part of the dissolution process, the breaking down of old patterns before the new can fully emerge. If you've experienced external circumstances challenging your new assumptions, share by typing "passing the test" in the comments. This inner stance of trusting the unseen while navigating contradictory external evidence connects directly to what Florence Scovel Shinn describes as walking by faith, not by sight. Drawing from biblical wisdom, she reveals why persistence through contradiction is essential to the manifestation process. The visible world around you doesn't show what's possible. It merely reflects the harvest of yesterday's assumptions. Current circumstances are like echoes of past thoughts, not prophecies of future limitations. Your physical reality is always slightly behind your consciousness, showing you where you've been rather than where you're going. This revelation transforms how you interpret your visible conditions. Instead of seeing them as evidence against your new assumption, recognize them as merely the shadow of old thinking that's already being replaced. Shinn explains that sight will inevitably deceive you during the transition period. It will show you only what has already been created through previous mental states, not what is currently being conceived within you. Faith looks beyond these temporary appearances to the unseen reality that's taking form beneath the surface. This isn't blind optimism. It's recognizing the causal relationship between inner states and outer manifestations, understanding that there's always a gestation period between the two. The time gap between your new assumption and its physical expression is what Shinn calls the measure of resistance. If the old state resists strongly, if your previous beliefs about lack and limitation are deeply entrenched, the interval may appear longer. But if you rest fully in the new assumption without wavering, the interval shortens and reality bends more swiftly to match your inner state. To illuminate this principle, Shinn returns to the powerful metaphor of farming. When a farmer plants seeds and looks the next morning to find nothing visible, he doesn't despair or conclude the process isn't working. He doesn't dig up the soil to check on his seeds or demand immediate evidence. He knows that germination happens beneath the surface, invisible to the eye yet absolutely certain. If the farmer were to dig up his seeds daily to check their progress, he would actually kill them and prevent the harvest. Similarly, when you plant the seed of a new assumption in your imagination, you must resist the urge to constantly check for results or demand immediate evidence. Trust the unseen process even when the visible soil of your circumstances appears barren. This farming analogy perfectly captures the patience and trust required during the manifestation process. The seed is alive beneath the surface, following immutable laws of growth that operate regardless of your ability to perceive them. Your role isn't to force the process, but to maintain the faithful assumption that allows it to unfold naturally. If you've learned to trust the invisible growth process rather than demanding immediate visible results, type "trusting the unseen" in the comments. Let me guide you into one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most profound metaphysical insights about the nature of reality itself. She describes our physical world, what she calls the 3D world, as merely a shadow that has no independent existence or power of its own. This shadow simply reflects the form of unseen causes that originate in imagination and consciousness. This revelation transforms our entire relationship with external circumstances. When you understand that physical reality is merely a projection, a shadow cast by inner states, you stop giving it power over you. The shadow has no life of its own. It only reflects the form that created it. Change the unseen form, and the shadow must follow. This is cosmic law, not wishful thinking. Shinn explains that most people have this relationship backward. They worship the shadow, believing that external conditions determine their inner state. They look at lack and feel poor. They see rejection and feel unwanted. They hear no and assume defeat. But this approach keeps them perpetually bound to circumstances rather than mastering them. The liberation comes when you recognize that the relationship works in reverse. Change the unseen, and the shadow must follow. When appearances rise against your new assumption, Shinn encourages you to actually rejoice, not because difficulties are pleasant, but because this resistance signals that the old state is crumbling. The very contradiction you face is evidence that transformation is underway. This perspective leads to one of Shinn's most fascinating concepts, the bridge of incidence, the mysterious way life rearranges itself to fulfill your inner assumptions. Once you've dared to live in the end and held fast against contradictory evidence, something marvelous begins to happen. The world starts shifting in ways you could never have orchestrated through logical planning. What appears as random encounters, chance events, unexpected opportunities, surprising coincidences, and even temporary setbacks are actually carefully orchestrated steps forming a bridge between your current reality and the fulfillment of your assumption. This bridge doesn't appear as a single dramatic event that instantly drops your desire into your lap. Rather, it unfolds as a series of seemingly unrelated incidents, each drawing you closer to the state you've assumed within. The revelation here is that you don't need to figure out how your desire will manifest. That belongs to the infinite intelligence of the subconscious. Your task is simply to assume the end and remain faithful while the bridge builds itself beneath your feet as you walk. You may not even recognize you're on the bridge until you look back and see how perfectly each step, even those that seemed like detours, led you precisely to your manifestation. This concept transforms how we interpret life's unexpected turns. Nothing is random when you're living from assumption. Every event, meeting, delay, and surprise becomes a plank on the bridge carrying you to your desire. If you've experienced mysterious coincidences leading to the fulfillment of something you deeply assumed, type "bridge of incidents" in the comments. To bring Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching to life, let me share one of her most illuminating examples of how the bridge of incidents operates in real-world circumstances. She tells the story of a friend who deeply desired to acquire a specific building in New York. From an objective standpoint, this seemed impossible. He had no money, no influence, no conventional means to secure such a property. But instead of focusing on these limitations, he applied the law of assumption with remarkable precision. Each night, he would enter the silence of imagination and assume complete ownership of the building. He didn't merely visualize it from a distance. He walked its halls in his mind, felt the marble floors beneath his feet, saw his name on the directory. He lived fully in the end, experiencing the emotional satisfaction of already possessing what he desired. What followed demonstrates the mysterious power of the bridge of incidents. Weeks passed, and then a chain of seemingly unrelated events began to unfold. He happened to meet an old acquaintance he hadn't seen in years, which led to an unexpected investment opportunity. A chance conversation at a social gathering connected him with someone who knew the building's owner. One by one, circumstances aligned in ways he could never have, engineered through logical planning. Looking back on the journey after he had successfully acquired the building, he could see how every event, even those that initially seemed irrelevant, had been a perfectly placed plank on the bridge leading to his manifestation. The revelation here isn't just that he got what he wanted, but that the path unfolded through divine orchestration rather than conscious manipulation. What's particularly fascinating about Shinn's teaching is her insight about apparent setbacks. She cautions against judging circumstances as negative, sharing a powerful story of a student who assumed wealth and then, to his shock and dismay, lost his job. He came to her furious, convinced the law had failed him, or worse, backfired. "I asked for riches," he complained, "and instead I was thrown out." With profound wisdom, Shinn counseled him. "Be still. This is the bridge. Do not judge yet. Trust the unseen hand." Her insight proved prophetic. Within weeks, freed from the limitations of his previous employment, he was offered partnership in a venture that made him far wealthier than his job ever could have. What initially appeared as disaster was actually a necessary step in his journey toward greater abundance. This revelation transforms how we interpret life's unexpected turns and apparent setbacks. The dissolution of the old must often precede the emergence of the new. What looks like failure may actually be clearing the path for something far better. The bridge of incidents doesn't always appear straightforward. It may take you through valleys before lifting you to mountains, dissolve existing structures before revealing new opportunities. If you've ever experienced what seemed like a setback that later revealed itself as a blessing in disguise, type "divine redirection" in the comments. Now, let me introduce you to what might be Florence Scovel Shinn's most revolutionary concept, one that challenges our fundamental understanding of time and memory. She proposes something that initially sounds impossible, that even the past can be revised through the creative power of imagination. This isn't merely positive thinking or reframing. It's a metaphysical understanding that what we call memory is itself a form of imagination clothed in the garment of yesterday. Most people believe they're condemned to drag behind them a chain of failures, insults, betrayals, and denials as though these events were written in stone. But Shinn discovered that you can return to any scene from your past and reimagine it as it ought to have been. If you persist in this revised mental imagery until the new scene feels more real than the old, your subconscious will accept it as fact, and your present world will begin to conform to this revision. The revolutionary insight here is that imagination knows neither past nor future. It knows only the eternal now. From the perspective of the subconscious, there is no difference between reimagining a past event and imagining a future one. Both are equally potent in shaping your present reality. This understanding liberates you from being a prisoner of your history. Consider the profound implications. Every wound can be healed, not by waiting for apologies from others or hoping circumstances improve, but by revising the story you tell yourself about what happened. Every time you remember a painful moment, you're actually keeping it alive through your attention. You're rehearsing and reinforcing the old assumption. But when you take that same memory and reimagine it as joy, success, or love, you plant a new seed in the subconscious that must eventually bear fruit in your present circumstances. Shinn shares a remarkable story that demonstrates this principle in action. A woman had quarreled bitterly with her sister, with harsh words spoken that cut deeply. For years, they lived estranged from one another, creating a painful void in both their lives. When the woman approached Shinn in despair, saying, "I long for her love, but she won't speak to me," Shinn offered unexpected guidance. Do not wait for her to change. Revise it. She instructed the woman to replay the scene each night in her imagination. Instead of harsh words, she was to hear her sister speaking with kindness. Instead of slamming doors, She was to feel her sister's arms around her in forgiveness. The woman followed this guidance faithfully, repeating the revised scene until it became more vivid than the original memory. Within weeks, something remarkable happened. Her sister wrote her a letter apologizing and expressing a desire for reconciliation. When they finally met, the words spoken in reality mirrored what the woman had heard in her imagination. The actual external relationship had transformed to match the internal revision. If you've realized that you have the power to rewrite painful past experiences through deliberate imagination, type "revising my story" in the comments. Florence Scovel Shinn doesn't just teach these principles theoretically, she lived them. One of her most compelling personal testimonies involves her own experience with revision. She once visited a place of business where she was harshly denied entry. The man at the door had spoken rudely, rejecting her request with unmistakable discourtesy. Rather than dwelling on this rejection or harboring resentment, she decided to apply the principle of revision to transform not just her memory, but the actual relationship. That night, as she prepared for sleep, she deliberately replayed the entire scene in her imagination, but with a crucial difference. Instead of hearing the man's harsh refusal, she imagined him saying, "Certainly, come in. You are welcome." She focused on the warmth of his welcome, the courtesy in his tone, the pleasant expression on his face. She persisted in this revised mental scene until the feeling of being welcomed felt more vivid and real than the sting of the earlier rejection. The transformation that followed demonstrates the remarkable power of this practice. Days later, when she returned to the same establishment, the very same man who had previously rejected her greeted her with open courtesy, as though the earlier unpleasant encounter had never occurred. The past had literally been rewritten through the power of her revised assumption. This phenomenon isn't merely psychological. It reveals something fundamental about the malleable nature of reality itself. Through revision, you're not simply changing how you feel about past events. You're actually altering the trajectory of their consequences in your present experience. This understanding liberates you from being defined by your history and empowers you to become the author of your story rather than its victim. The metaphysical mechanism behind this transformation lies in what Shinn reveals about the nature of the subconscious mind. Using a powerful reproductive metaphor, she compares the subconscious to a womb that conceives, carries, and gives birth to whatever is impressed upon it with feeling. This analogy illuminates the creative process with remarkable clarity. The conscious mind functions as the masculine principle that provides the seed, the idea, the assumption, the mental image. But it's the subconscious that functions as the feminine principle, receiving the impression and bringing it forth as manifestation. Without the union of these two aspects of mind, nothing can be created. And the sacred act that weds them, the mysterious bridge between conscious intent and subconscious acceptance, is feeling. This understanding explains why some people can recite affirmations for years with no results, while others manifest dramatic changes almost immediately. The subconscious doesn't argue, reason, or evaluate the logic of what you present to it. It simply accepts whatever you impress upon it with genuine feeling, and then works tirelessly to express that impression in your outer experience. If you've recognized the relationship between your conscious declarations and your subconscious acceptance, type "wedding of minds" in the comments. Let me delve deeper into how Florence Scovel Shinn expands these principles beyond financial abundance to all areas of life, including physical healing. She shares a powerful story about a man who struggled with a persistent health condition. Despite years of conventional prayer, asking, pleading, and begging for healing, his condition remained unchanged. When he sought Shinn's guidance, she offered an insight that completely transformed his approach. "You are speaking to the conscious mind only," she told him. "The subconscious is not moved by words, but by feeling. Tonight, enter the silence and feel yourself well. Imagine the relief, the ease, the strength. Do not ask for healing. Feel healed." The distinction here is profound. Instead of focusing on the absence of health and begging for its return, she guided him to enter fully into the feeling state of already being well. This shift from lack to possession, from future possibility to present reality, changed everything. Within weeks, his body began to reflect the state of wellness he had assumed in imagination. The subconscious, impressed by his feeling of health rather than his words about illness, expressed that impression physically. This example reveals the universal nature of the law. It operates identically whether applied to wealth, health, relationships, or any other aspect of human experience. The principle remains constant. What you feel as real in the depths of your being must eventually express itself in your outer world. This understanding leads to Shinn's revolutionary redefinition of prayer itself. She challenges centuries of religious tradition that has portrayed prayer as asking, begging, or pleading with a distant deity. In this conventional model, humans kneel as supplicants, hoping that if they repeat their requests enough times with sufficient intensity, God might eventually have mercy and grant their wishes. Shinn proposes something radically different. True prayer is not words directed outward, but feeling directed inward. Prayer is not asking, but assuming. Prayer is not hope, but acceptance. Prayer is the art of assuming the wish fulfilled and resting in that assumption until it feels natural. This perspective transforms prayer from an act of petition to an act of recognition, acknowledging what is already complete in the unseen realm. She points out the inherent contradiction in conventional prayer. When you say, "God, give me wealth," you're actually confessing, "I am poor." When you plead, "God, heal me," you're affirming, "I am sick." These declarations, clothed in the emotional conviction of lack, impress the subconscious far more powerfully than your conscious words requesting abundance or health. The breakthrough occurs when you close your eyes, withdraw from sensory evidence, and enter fully into the scene of fulfillment, feeling the joy of already being wealthy, already being healed, already being loved. This feeling state, accepted by the subconscious as current reality, becomes the true prayer, and prayer performed in this way cannot fail. If you've experienced the difference between prayer as asking and prayer as assuming completion, share your insight by typing "prayer transformed" in the comments. Let me share a fascinating story that illustrates how Florence Scovel Shinn's principles transform even the most practical areas of life, like career advancement. She tells of a man who desperately wanted a promotion at work. Following conventional wisdom, he would pray nightly, saying, "Lord, please let them notice me. Please give me the position." Despite his persistence, nothing changed. His career remained stagnant, and the recognition he sought never materialized. When he finally approached Shinn for guidance, she identified the fundamental flaw in his approach. "You're asking as though you were a beggar. Begin assuming as though it were already yours." This shift in perspective represented a complete reversal of his relationship with his desire. That night, rather than pleading for future recognition, he entered into the silence of imagination and created a vivid mental scene. He imagined shaking his employer's hand and hearing the words, "Congratulations." He didn't just visualize this abstractly. He felt the authentic joy of success, the pride of recognition, the relief of accomplishment. He immersed himself in these emotions until the imaginal scene felt genuinely real. The transformation that followed illustrates the striking difference between ineffective and effective prayer. Within a remarkably short time, the very promotion he had long sought was offered to him. What changed wasn't his external actions or qualifications. What changed was his inner relationship with his desire. He stopped asking and began assuming. He prayed not with words of petition, but with feelings of possession. This experience reveals the core distinction Shinn makes between conventional prayer and effective manifestation. When you plead for something, you're unconsciously reinforcing your separation from it. When you feel gratitude for already having received it, you're establishing psychological possession that must eventually express itself outwardly. To provide empirical evidence of this principle's reliability, Shinn developed what she called the ladder test, a simple experiment anyone can conduct to prove that imagination creates reality. Standing before audiences, she would challenge them. Do not take my word for this, prove it. She would ask them to test the principle with something ordinary yet specific enough that when it manifested, they would recognize it wasn't mere coincidence. The experiment is elegantly simple. For 3 consecutive nights before sleep, close your eyes and imagine climbing a ladder. Don't merely visualize it. Feel it sensually. Feel your hands grasping the rungs, your feet lifting you upward, even smell the wood or metal. Make the experience as vivid as possible. During your waking hours, actively deny this imagery by telling yourself, I will not climb a ladder. You can even write this down as a conscious affirmation of what you won't do. The results of this experiment have been consistently astonishing. Without fail, people who faithfully perform this mental exercise find themselves climbing ladders in the most unexpected circumstances within days. Some are asked at work to retrieve items from high shelves. Others visit friends who suddenly need help with attic access. One woman who initially laughed at the experiment's simplicity found herself in a store where a clerk unexpectedly asked her to step onto a ladder to reach a box. If you've conducted a deliberate manifestation experiment with surprising results, share by typing "Prove the Law" in the comments. Now, I want to reveal a profound philosophical insight that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered about the true nature of money itself. This understanding transforms our entire relationship with wealth and explains why so many conventional approaches to financial abundance fall short. Shinn realized that money is nothing but a shadow. It has no power or life of its own. It's merely a symbol that represents inner states like freedom, security, ease, and plenty. This revelation completely inverts how most people approach wealth creation. They look at numbers on a page, at figures in bank accounts, and they tremble before these symbols as though they were gods with independent power. They chase the shadow while feeling the lack of what the shadow represents, not realizing that this approach keeps abundance perpetually out of reach. The transformation begins when you grasp that the subconscious doesn't deal in numbers at all. It doesn't know the difference between $1 and $100 million. To the creative center of your being, there is no small or great wealth. There is only the state impressed upon it by feeling. When you feel secure, the subconscious registers, I am secure, and expresses it. When you feel wealthy, the subconscious accepts, I am wealthy, and manifests it. The outer world then clothes that feeling in whatever forms are most natural, whether through checks, contracts, investments, unexpected gifts, or sudden opportunities. But these external manifestations are merely echoes of the inner reality. The shadow follows the substance, never the reverse. Shinn illustrates this principle with a remarkable story about a student who struggled with traditional approaches to wealth. He would dutifully affirm, I am rich, daily, yet nothing changed in his financial situation. When Shinn inquired about his process, he admitted feeling like a fraud every time he made these declarations. The words and the feeling were in conflict, with the feeling inevitably winning. Her guidance represented a complete paradigm shift. Forget the numbers. Forget the dollars. Tonight, instead, feel what it would be like to be rich. She directed him away from the abstract counting of money to the actual mood of wealth itself, the ease of paying every bill without worry, the joy of giving without fear, the dignity of walking as someone who is abundantly supplied. Following this guidance, he stopped reciting empty affirmations about specific amounts and began to assume the inner state of wealth. Within months, his financial reality transformed dramatically. Investments prospered, debts cleared, and abundance flowed freely into his life. What changed? Not the world first, but his feeling. He captured what Shinn calls the $1 million feeling, and the millions naturally followed. This understanding illuminates why Scripture declares, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith isn't belief in a doctrine, it's the feeling of fulfillment. When you feel wealthy despite external evidence to the contrary, That feeling becomes the substance from which external abundance must eventually manifest. If you've recognized that chasing numbers keeps wealth at a distance while embodying the feeling of abundance draws it closer, type "feeling is substance" in the comments. The hour of night holds a particular magic in Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching on manifestation. Let me guide you into understanding why this drowsy threshold between waking and sleeping represents what she calls the temple hour, the most sacred time for impressing your desires upon the subconscious mind. This insight transforms your nightly routine into a powerful ritual of creation. Shinn discovered that night is far more than physical rest. It's the optimal gateway between the conscious and subconscious realms. During your waking hours, the analytical mind is constantly active, distracted by external stimuli, and often resistant to new patterns that contradict established beliefs. But as you drift toward sleep, a remarkable transformation occurs. The conscious mind grows increasingly passive, the senses gradually fade, and in that twilight state, the subconscious lies open and receptive like never before. This understanding explains why Scripture is filled with references to dreams, visions of the night, and divine encounters that happen while people sleep. The biblical phrase, "When deep sleep falleth upon men, then he openeth their ears and sealeth their instruction," points to this profound truth about consciousness. What you impress upon the subconscious during this borderland state becomes sealed, accepted as fact, and destined for expression. The revelation here transforms how you approach the moments before sleep. Most people carry the debris of the day into their night, rehearsing worries, replaying conflicts, or anticipating tomorrow's problems. But Shinn warns that whatever mood you carry into sleep becomes impressed on the subconscious and multiplied in your experience. If you fall asleep in worry, you plant worry. If you drift off rehearsing fears, you awaken to more fears. The transformation begins when you consciously use this threshold as a sacred altar for impressing your desires. Rather than allowing random thoughts to dominate this precious time, you deliberately speak your 7 words with feeling, allowing them to sink deep into the receptive soil of the subconscious just before sleep claims you. This practice culminates in Shinn's powerful recommendation to select 7 words that encapsulate your desire in a state of completion and possession. The formula isn't complicated. It's simple enough to repeat without effort, yet meaningful enough to evoke genuine feeling. Examples like, "Thank you, Father," "It is already done," or "I am supplied," "I am wealthy now," carry the perfect combination of gratitude, completion, and present possession. The journey of manifestation culminates in this nightly practice of speaking your chosen words with conviction as you drift towards sleep. Not as mechanical repetition, but as living prayer clothed in the feeling of fulfillment. As you repeat this practice night after night, the words gradually sink deeper, becoming more natural, more believable, until they no longer feel like affirmations, but simply statements of fact. If you've recognized the power of those drowsy moments before sleep as the perfect time for planting new beliefs, type "sacred threshold" in the comments below. As our journey with Florence Scovel Shinn's transformative teachings comes to a close, I hope you're feeling that spark of possibility igniting within you. This isn't just information. It's a doorway to a completely new relationship with abundance that begins tonight when you lay your head on your pillow. If what you've heard resonates with your spirit, consider becoming part of our community by subscribing. Each week, we explore these timeless principles that have changed countless lives, including my own. The wisdom shared here isn't theoretical, it's practical, applicable, and waiting for you to put it into action. I'd love to know if this message found you at exactly the right moment. If you've made it to the end and feel called to apply these principles in your own life, simply write "divine timing" in the comments below. Your journey matters to me, and I read every comment personally. If you found value in today's exploration, a simple like helps others discover these teachings too, creating ripples of transformation beyond what we can imagine. I've prepared a deeper dive into the bridge of incidents concept we touched on today. It's a perfect companion to what you've just learned, revealing how the universe conspires to bring your assumptions into reality. The video is waiting for you right here. Click and continue this journey of discovery with me. Until next time, remember those 7 powerful words as, you drift to sleep tonight. Your new story is already being written.